we'll now create our form for the personal info. This form contains some radio buttons, several different text input elements. This one is for a number, this is for phone, text, email, more text, a number for the zip code, and then finally a select element to select the country. So in our code editor, we'll go inside of our first div tag here in the tab content. Then we'll start with adding a div tag with the class form row. So what we're doing now is we'll create the grid structure to make it responsive. Since we're not, the reason why we're not only using the class row, instead we're using form row, this is because the gutter between the columns will then be smaller when we use form row instead of just row. So next we'll create our first column using the class call md3 and also the class form group. So initially this will take up the full width, and then for medium devices it will take up a quarter of the available width. We'll use the form group to group around all of our inputs. So we'll now add a label tag, the text sex, close our label tag again, and then we'll create a div tag around our radio button groups. So we'll now create a div tag with the class form check and form check inline. This will make our radio become inline. The actual input element will have the type attribute with the value radio and the class form check input to style this properly. We'll add the attribute name, the value is sex, the ID with the value is sex male, and the value attribute with the value male. Please notice that the name and value attributes are not quite visible, but this is for storing the correct information if you were to submit this to a server. Then we'll add the label for this radio button. We use the label tag with the class form check label and the for attribute with the value sex male and the text male, and close our label tag. So this for attribute with the value sex male leads to this ID, so these are linked together. We can now copy this and we can change the ID sex male or the word male to female, and also the text will change that to female. Let's just save this and go into our browser and refresh. Now we see that we have this first column here taking up a quarter of the available width for medium devices and initially taking up all the available width. Alright, let's continue with our next column and form group. So we add the div tag again with the class call md3, the class form group. The form group is to provide spacing between our form groups. Then we add the label attribute with the for, or the label tag with the for attribute with the value h and the text h. Close our label tag again, and we add the input tag with the type attribute with the value number, the class form control, and the ID h. Please notice a few differences. Up here for the radio button, our label is after our input, so that the radio will be before the text. But usually you want the label before the input, as we can see down here. Also notice that for regular text input elements we need the class form control, but for radio buttons and checkboxes we need to use the class form check label. and form check input. So for a normal label, we don't use anything, and for a normal input, we use form control. So this is a little different. This number value here in the type attribute will make the user see a keypad with numbers on their phone instead of letters. So this is convenient to use, and the user can't type in any text either, only numbers. All right, we'll add our phone field here. So we'll change this value to phone, and the type will be tell. So this will help the user to type in a phone number. Let's just save this and take a quick look. Now we see these values here. All right, I can see that we actually need this phone to extend 6 and not just 3 out of 12 columns. So this is the correct way. This is our finished page. This is our current page. The first line now looks correct. Let's continue to create the name, email, address, apartment floor, and city. So we'll now create a new form row, a div tag with the class form row. And inside this, we'll add 2 columns using a div tag with the class col md6 and the class form group. So initially this will take up all the available width. For medium devices, it will take up half of the width. We'll add a label tag again, the for attribute with the value name and the text name. And then we'll create an input element with the type text and the class form control, the ID name, and the placeholder attribute with the value first name, last name. Now we'll copy this form group and change this to email, change these values to email, change the type to email, and we'll change our placeholder to username at domain.com. Let's see what this looks like. This looks just perfect. Now let's take our next 2 input elements, address and apartment or floor. So we create, actually we'll just copy this like so. And then first we have our address. We change the for attribute and the ID attribute, set the value to address, and the placeholder will be 1234 Grand Avenue. Then we have apartment or floor, and we'll change this to apartment, and of course our type should still be text. There's no type for apartment. The placeholder will be changed to B3 4th floor or similar. Now let's check this in the browser. This looks right. Now actually it doesn't look right. We see that on our complete project the address should take up 3/4 and the apartment only 1/4. So let's go back again. We need to change this to 9 and this to 3. This went a little too quick, so back again. Now it looks correct. All right. Now we want to create the city, zip, and country. So we'll create one more form row, div tag with the class form row, and then we'll create a div tag with the class call md6 and the class form group. So this will turn into a 2-column grid, taking up half of the available width. Then we have a label attribute with the value, or the for attribute with the value city, and the text city. Then an input element with the type text, a class form control, the ID city, and the placeholder city. So very similar to what we did before. I just said this would turn into a 2-column grid, but this was wrong. Of course, we have 3, or we're gonna create 3 input elements now. The first will take up half of the available width, but the next one, which is our zip, will only take up 2 out of 12 columns, so 1/6 of the available width. We'll change the value of the for attribute and ID attribute to zip, and the text to zip. And the type attribute will get the value in number, and the placeholder will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Now our last column in this row will take up 1/3 of the available width, so 4 out of 12 columns. And this looks different since it's a select element. First we have the label, which is similar, a label attribute or a label tag with the for attribute with the value country and the text country. Then we'll create our select tag with the ID country and give it the class form control. Inside of this we'll add our first option tag with the value attribute having an empty value and the attribute selected, so this will be the default one. We'll give it the text select country, like so, and close our option tag again. The next option tag will get the value attribute with the value Denmark and the text Denmark. I'll just copy this 3 times and change the value of the value attribute and the text value to Finland, Norway, and Sweden. All right, let's save and take a quick look. Here we see that it takes up 6, 2, and 4 of the column width. Now we only need to add this button to go to the next step. So we do that right here. After our form row, we add a button tag with the type button. So this will not be the submit button for the form, but just a button to lead the user to the next page. And then we add a class btn outline secondary to give it the outline style with the secondary color, which is the gray color. We'll make it large by adding the class btn lg. Then we want to make it display block and have it give it a margin left with the value auto. So this will force it to the right side of the screen since the margin left value is auto. We'll give it the ID go to step 2. We'll use that later on. Then we'll add the text for the button, step 2, and close the button tag again. Now let's save and go back and have a final look. Now it looks exactly the same. We can see initially everything stacks on top of each other. Then for medium device it turns into this rather advanced grid. So this is 3 out of 12 columns, 3 out of 12, 6 out of 12, 6 out of 12, 9 out of 12 columns, 3 out of 12 columns, 6, 2, and 4. So we're using a lot of different column sizes for our form. All right, well, let's continue.